Oh, so yeah, Mr. Musa Ibrahim, good evening. 1 minute. Yes. Good evening, Mr. Musa Ibrahim. Who else is on platform? Mr. Musa Ibrahim, you're welcome. Yes, Mr. Musa Ibrahim, thank you for joining the class today. Can you hear me? Can you? Mr. Musa Ibrahim, please, can you hear me? Hello? Okay, Mr. Dewo. Okay, so thank you very much for coming in. Mr. Emeka Kuki, you're welcome. Emmanuel Azubike, you're also welcome. And I want to say to everybody that is online and others that will join us and others that will watch the video on replay, good evening and welcome. My name is Anietie, and this is our data analytics hangout every Sunday by 7 p.m. If today is your first time, remember to hit the subscribe button and then check through the videos, what we've been doing since December. So for today, today is a continuation of the class we did last week, where we looked at data modeling, how to link more than one data set. So last week, what we did was we used Power Query to link multiple data sets. And I told us in class that using Power Query is okay, but in business cases, it's better you use Power Pivot. Why? Because when you use Power Query, the file of the size of the file is heavy. When you use is light. Okay, Mr. Austin Bain, you're welcome. Mr. David Bruno said it's your first time. Thank you, you're welcome. Remember to hit the subscribe button and later check our other videos, what we've been doing. So, what's the case we're looking at? And just before we continue, I want to share with us that the data set we worked with last week, somebody took that data set and she did a complete work. She worked on that data up to the point of building a dashboard. I was impressed when I saw it. So I want to encourage us. I've told us again and again that application is higher than learning. Don't depend on what we do here alone as um, your your motivation, as where you get all your information from. The things you do by yourself, these are the cases where you actually build steam as a data analyst. Okay, later in the class, I'll show us what she did. She did a post of it on LinkedIn. Her name is Azizat. Okay, I think I have seen the posts. Okay, Salam. Yeah. So I'll bring it later in the discussion for us to look at. So let's get straight to what we have for today. Please, if you can hear me, just okay. I'm seeing loud and clear, loud and clear. That means you can all hear me. So let me show us the data set for today's class. Let me bring up the data set that we use for today's class. So I want to share screen. Just a sec. Okay, bear with me. Okay, so my screen is up. This is the data set we want to use for today. So this is a medical data set. I want to be sure that you can all share with me. Okay, so this is a medical data set. And like we said, it's a continuation of what we did last week. And last week, we combined these different tables using Power Query. But today, we want to combine them using Power Pivot. So I want to introduce you to Power Pivot. I want to show you how to activate your Power Pivot and how to use it as a data analyst. Now, if you're used to Power Query is very good. Power Query, you can use it to link multiple worksheets. Now, when you link the worksheets with Power Query, what happens is that, let's say you bring this particular data. Let's bring this table. This table has 50 rows of data, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. When you link it with this one using Power Query, this one also has 250 rows of, so this one also has 50 rows of data, and it has about 4 columns. When you use Power Query to link these two, what happens is it will create a new table, and the size of that table will be 50 rows and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 columns. At that point, what happens is it increases the weight, the size of the database. So technically speaking, using Power Query to combine tables like this, especially when you're working with tables with different data, when you're doing this, the Power Pivot becomes better. That's what I want us to understand. When you use Power Query, the size of the table now increases. Now you'll be working with 9 columns. So anytime you click the refresh button, the system will refresh 50 times 9. Are we together? So, but if you use Power Pivot will allow this table to be 4, will allow the other table to be 5, and will just create a link between the two tables. So for example, you only need information on this table. It will not necessarily refresh the two tables. It will only refresh one table. At that point, Power Pivot will make the database lighter, will make your process faster, will reduce the load, the amount of resources used. So firstly, Power Pivot and Power Query, they are both very okay. When it comes to you want to join data of the same type, Power Query is very good. But when you want to link data of different types, like we have now, of different information where they have a primary key that is the same, Power Pivot is better compared to Power Query. Why? One of the reasons is because of the refresh time. Okay, so let's look at this data technically before we proceed. This is a hospital data. Patients come to the hospital. So in the patient's detail, we have patient's ID, patient's name, and age, and gender, and marital status. Now, for each patient that comes to the hospital, there is a treatment they give to the patient. So for the patient, they have the patient's ID. That's the unique ID for the patient. So now for each patient, they will assign a doctor, and then there is a treatment process. That's why we have this table called treatment. So for each patient, patient 1001, there's a doctor. Doctor 2001 is assigned to this patient, 2001 is assigned to this patient, and you see the distribution of the doctors and the patient. Now, for each of these doctors, where we will get more information about the doctors is when we come to this other table called doctors. So we can see that they have 5 doctors, you can see their name and their area of specialization. So after these doctors treat the patient will now make payment. So for the payment, there's a receipt ID, and the payment is attached to each patient. So this particular patient, 1001, this is the ID, the receipt ID. Then after the treatment, the payment, the patients are asked to rate the performance of the doctors. So we have this table that has the performance. Now let me explain 2 things. One, I'll handle it in subsequent class, not today's class. When you have this data, sometimes when it comes, it will all be in one worksheet. Analyzing data that way makes the whole process heavy. So when you have too many information in one worksheet, I would advise you to split it to multiple worksheets. One of the key reasons it makes your analysis faster, so that anytime you're working on, for example, if we allow this doctor information to be in the entire data set that has 50 rows of data. Let's say it's 50,000 rows of data. You get, and you just have these 5 doctors in that row. When you want to refresh information about the doctors, instead of refreshing just 5, you're refreshing 50,000. So that's one of the things. You must learn how to break data into smaller sets, and then you work with it. So that's the first discussion. The second discussion is, for us to be able to link any of these tables, there must exist at least one common column between them. So let me show us. Doctors table, we have the doctor ID. Is related to the treatment table. That's why we have the doctor ID here. Now the treatment table will have patient ID. Is related to the patient table, which is the patient ID. Now the patient ID, the patient table is related to the ratings table. That's the patient ID, and the payment, that's the patient ID. So we have established that we have relationship existing between all the tables. Then secondly, the data type. The data type must be the same for each of the where we have the primary keys. So now let's start. Pivot table. How do you activate pivot table? The first thing is you need to activate, how do you activate power pivot? I've activated my power pivot already. So it's showing here. So one of the easiest ways is to come down here and then click on this button. But another better way is when you come to file, I'll take the steps. You click on file and you go to more. In some systems, you will see options. Some systems, you will see more. When you click on more, you click on options. So in options, you will see adding. So click on the add-ins. And it will show all the add-ins. It will show active and inactive. For me, I've enabled it. So it's showing active here, but in your own, it will show under inactive application add-ins. So power pivot is listed under the COM add-ins. So come to this manage where you have Excel add-ins and click on this drop-down arrow. You will see COM add-ins. So click on it and then say go. So when you click on go, you will have the add-ins here that are available for your system. So what you need to do, just check this box. I've checked mine is working already. So check where you have Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel. Just check it and say okay. That's just it. When you do that, you come to your menu. You will now see Power Pivot as one of the options. So from here, you can create the data model. So I'll show you how to create the data model in 2 simple ways. Now let's start with the first one. I need to work with 2 versions of this document. So let me just create a backup. I'm creating a backup because of the second example. So let me call it, let me rename this one as backup. Okay. So I'll use it later. I want to use that as an example. So let's come back to the work. So the first thing, we need to convert the data. We need to convert this, each of the tables to, each of the range to a table. So click on any cell, Control T, and I click OK. So we come down here. I want to give the table names. Let me drop this one automatically. Okay, so each of the tables, I'll just give them names so that we know the table we're working with. So I want to call this one patients. That's the first table. I go to the second table, click on any cell, hit Control T, say OK, come to table design, and I want to call this one treatment. Press enter. Hit on the third table, and I click on this one, and I hit Control T, and what you can do, say OK, go to table design and call this one payments. Press enter. And the fourth table, click on it, hit Control T, press enter. Table design, we want to call these ones the ratings, customer ratings. And the next one is doctors. So click on doctors, Control T, click OK. Table design, we want to call this one the doctors. Okay, so let's start creating the relationship. So I'll show you the first way, which is my own. Can you move you? Okay, so somebody saying I should take off the picture. So let me remove my picture. 1 second. Let me remove my picture. So, okay, I think it's better now. My picture is off. We can proceed. So how do we create this relationship? I want to show us the short, the easy method. So simply, I come to data, click on any of the tables. First, I want to create a relationship between the doctors and the treatment, the doctor table and the treatment. So this is the treatment table, this is the doctor table. So we can click on any one, either the treatment table or the doctor table. It's okay. So go to data. Then in your data tools, you will see the relationship icon. This is the relationship icon. So click on it, and we click on new. Now our first table is the treatment table, because that's where we have the data. So treatment table. And the second table, in this treatment table, which item do we want to work on? Well, look, we need doctor information. So we click on doctor. Now, the related table, where do we have information about the doctors, is in doctor table. So I click on doctors, and I come here and I click on doctor ID. So these two, you get the primary key and the foreign key, they should be the same. The data type should be the same. They should contain the same information, because this is what is creating, this is what we use to create the link between the two tables. And I click on OK. So it will create the relationship, and I can simply say close. So now there's a relationship between these two tables. When we did the one for last week, remember when we created this relationship, what you will see, you will now see additional columns here showing information about the doctor. Like I explained when we started, what happens is this will now increase the number of columns, which will also increase the weight, the size of the database, which is something we're trying to avoid as data analysts. Size is important. Now, what we have done, so nothing changed in the data, but behind the scene, there's a relationship now between treatment table and doctor's table. How do we see this relationship? Go to data, and still in data tools, you will see this button here called data model, the icon. So just click on it, and it will simply call up your Power Pivot. Now, so this is the Power Pivot environment. Now click on diagram view. So when we click on diagram view, this is showing us what we have done. So behind the scene, now there's a relationship between these two tables, which now, so now instead of bringing all the items in this table into this table, we leave these items here in doctors, leave this item here in treatment, but we just have relationship. So because this line, this relationship exists, are we together? We can, any information we need from here, we can bring it down here. Any information we need from here, we can bring it down here without moving all the data from one to the other. That's the beautiful thing with it. Okay, so we have done with that. We are done with that table. Let's do for the other tables. We can close this or reduce it. So let me close it. Now the next one, we want to relate treatment. So for each treatment, there is a patient. So for each patient, there's a treatment. So we go again to data, and we go to relationship, and we click on new. So this time for each patient, we bring up the patient's ID. There is a treatment. So we go to treatment. It's already in the data model, and patient ID. So you can see the patient ID, because that's what is used. That's what will be used to create the link. So we click on OK. There is another relationship. If I close this, and then we go to data, and then we go to data model, and we go to diagram view, you can see behind the scene, it's creating the relationship for us. Okay, so let's continue. Let's do with the remaining. So for each, the next one now is for the rating. So for each rating, we need information about the patient. So the rating will be our focus. So come to data, create new. So the table here is ratings, and the primary key, the foreign key here, we need information about the patient. So where do we have information about the patient? We have it in the patient's model, and we'll also bring patient ID. We okay that one. Then we can create the last one. So this one now we need about the payment. So for each payment is attached to a patient. Where do you have the information about the patient? Is in the patient's table, and we link the patients. We click OK, and we close this. So with this, we have just created what is called a data model. So when you hear the word data model, this is what we mean by data modeling. We have created, these are the different tables. Okay, so this is a data model we just created now. Are we together? So let me grab this, and I'll just place here in Microsoft Word because we need it later as a reference. Okay, so this is how to create a data model. Now let's see how this will help us in our analysis. So we can create a pivot table from here, or we can go to Excel and create a pivot table directly. So let's come back to our Excel. So this is our Excel. Now we want to create a pivot table from this particular work. So come to Insert and then go to pivot table. Remember, before when we use the method we used last week, we create the pivot table from table range. But in this case, we create the pivot table from the data model. So that's another difference. So click on from data model. We'll use a new sheet. So you can see the models here listed. You can simply move all of them. You can see inactive. There's nothing inactive. They're all, we have them here. So we can just right click and say show inactive tab. Just show all of them in active tab. Show all of them in active tab. Yes, now we can start the analysis. If we go to active tab, we see all the models. They're all listed. Good. Now, one of the things the hospital wanted, they were asked to analyze three things. If you remember from last week: one, which doctor has the highest rating; two, which doctor generated the highest amount; three, the doctor with the highest number of patients. So let's start with the ratings. So if we come to where do we have information about the doctors? So we have information about the doctor in this table called doctors. So we just bring the doctor's name, the name of the doctors. Then you can see that we can go to another table. Where do we have information about rating? Here, we can bring the review ratings. And we, instead of using sum, remember we use average. So this is the average rating. Now you can see the beautiful thing with the data model is information. Each data is in each table. We have the data in different tables, but we can easily call each data point from anywhere, anytime, and we'll get the information we need. So if we number format this to number of decimal places, we say 2 decimal places, and then we go from sort it from largest to smallest. Remember last week, Dr. Nkechi was the highest, so we can see that information is here. Then we can simply go to pivot table, analyze, and we represent this using a chart. So we can have this quickly hide all field buttons, and we take this off, take this off, take this off, take the lines off, and I use my own color code for my dashboard. Okay, and data labels. So add data labels, add data labels. Okay, are we together? So this is one. Let me quickly do a second one before I show us the second method. So if I copy this and I place here Control V, if we take this one out, we can go to another table now. Let's say count of patients. So you can see we have the patient information here. If we bring this one here, and then we say count of patients, and we sort this from smallest to largest. Then we use a bar chart to represent this. So the same thing too. You can see the doctor when it comes to rating. Take this one off. Take this one off. Add data labels, and we can simply just use another color for this. Okay, so we can see clearly that when it comes to performance, that when it comes to rating, Dr. Nkechi has a higher rating compared to Dr. Ibrahim Yusuf. When it comes to number of patients, who handled the highest number of patients within the period, Dr. Ade Oluwa Femi handled more than Dr. Chioma Nwosu had the lowest number of patients. So this is one way to do data modeling. Now, the second way to do data modeling, I want to show us this one too. Now, in this case, I'll use the same data, but a copy of it. So let me bring this up. Let me bring this one up. So this is the same data. So quickly, we first convert all of this to tables. So Control T, and we'll call this patients. This is the second method. Treatment. Before I do the second method, I'll pause for 1 minute to take questions. So bear with me. Let me just create the tables, then we'll take questions. Treatment. And the third table, Control T, enter. This will be payments. And Control T, enter. This will be ratings. And the last one is doctors. Doctors, Control T, enter. So this will be doctors. Okay, so we'll just pause here and quickly take questions. Questions. Time for questions and discussions. Questions and discussions. Questions and discussions. You can come up with your questions at this point. Yes, any question, anywhere you have a challenge, or any suggestion, any question you want to ask. Okay, so I can. Okay. Yeah, question. Okay, so I want to assume that the class we're getting it, and I can proceed. And I'll also encourage us, if you have not gotten my course, the data analytics course, a full course on the entire data analytics process. I have 2 courses presently. One is for beginners, then the second one is for the advanced level. I also want to encourage you to go get that course now. It's one of the best courses when it comes to building your skill as a data analyst. That's number 1. Number 2, for those in Abuja, I'll be in Abuja from the 1st to 10th for a complete data analytics class. So if you're in Abuja, you can join me for that class. We'll have the weekdays section and also have weekend section. I will send the flyer to us later, so we'll look at it. And then you can also inform your friends, people that are in Abuja, to join us in the class. Okay, so let's continue. That's more like a quick description. Now let's move on. So the second method is this. In the second method, we want to use the pivot table itself. Now we can simply click on the data and come here, and then we say we have the add this to data model. So we can simply click add this to data model. We have that first table added, and we click on the second one, ratings. We come to Power Pivot and we say add this to data model. You can see we have doctors table, we have ratings table. Number 3, we have payments table. Come to Power Pivot and we say add this to data model. Number 3. Number 4, we have the treatments table. Click on it and say add this to data model. Then number 5, we also click on it, Power Pivot, and we say add this to data model. So we have the 5 tables all added to the data model. Okay, so while in Power Pivot, just click on the diagram view to show you all your tables. We just adjust them. So we scroll down here. Some of the tables are here. So we bring them close. Okay, so we have our 5 tables. Now, how the tables are linked, there's a relationship between the doctor table and the treatment table. And we can see that there's a doctor ID, there's a doctor ID here. So what we do, we click on this doctor table and just drag and drop on this treatment table. Now, if we click on this doctor ID, we must drop it on top of the doctor ID. For those of us that are familiar with Power BI, this is, you have experienced this in Power BI, you do this a lot in Power BI. So I'm telling us that in Excel also has the same feature to do exactly this in Excel. So that's 1. 2, there's a relationship between the patient's table and the treatment table. So we drag this and link this with the treatment table. Then 3, there's a relationship between the patients and the payments. So we drag this and we relate this. That's number 3. Then between ratings and patients, we also drag it You can see that I drag it and I make sure it's on top of the other one. I mouse over each of these to see the selection. That when I mouse over the relationship, the line selects patient ID, patient ID. If you mistakenly move it to another one, you can delete the relationship. So I can right click here and then say delete relationship. Say delete from model and I say yes. Together. So for example, if I drag patient ID to age, it will look, but when you now try to work on it, it will create an error. So when there's a mistake like this, you can just right click on the relationship and then say delete from model. Then let's link it properly. Patient ID to patient ID. We have created the model. That's okay. So we come to this point and then insert, go to pivot and we say from data model. Let's use a new worksheet to create this. We add all of this we show this in the active tab. 5, okay. So we need information about the doctors and the ratings. So we can take the ratings here and click on this and say value field settings, use average. Oh, relationship between tables may be needed auto detect. Okay, so that means we need to check the relationship. So let's go to our power pivots. Let's go to our power pivot and then check. So one of the linking we did not do it correctly. So manage, click on manage. Go to power pivots. Click on manage. Yes, let's look at it. There's a relationship between doctors and treatments. Then okay. So this is where we have there's a relationship between treatments. Yes. Then there's a relationship between patients and the payments, and there's a relationship between patients and um, ratings. Okay, so let's refresh this. Refresh all. So let's just wait for it to refresh. Because of that delete, I did that delete 2 times. So I had to wait for it to refresh and I close and we save. And then let's go back to our table again. And let's go to inserts from data model. Use new. And we right click and we say show. Right click and say show, and we right click and show. I click and show, and then we bring the treatments. So we bring the doctor. So so for each of the doctors, let's see. For each of the doctors, the payment generated by each doctor, amounts generated by each doctor, 825. Okay, so that means I need to check the relationship again. Okay, so now what we'll do is this. So I need to check the relationship where there's one of the relationship that I need to connect. Patient ID, doctor ID, doctor ID, patient ID, patient ID, patient ID, patient ID. So what you do with me is this ending part, I will skip this ending part, then check why I have this error, concerning the relationship. This error concerning the relationship. Let me refresh again. And the refresh is okay, 50 rows transferred is successful. Okay, so if it does not connect, the first one work, we'll run with that one. We'll run with that one. But let me take on closing questions while I quickly check what happened to our data model. So closing questions. We're through with the class. I'll just quickly yeah, somebody asked how do we troubleshoot. So let me quickly do that while I take closing questions. So please, your questions. Let's discuss questions based on what we have done. Okay. Any question? Any question? Okay. Okay. So the difference between the two methods and which do you advise? Okay. So doctors, doctor ID, and patients. Okay. Um, okay. The difference between the two methods and which do you advise for us beginners? Okay. So somebody said, what's the difference? Somebody said the difference between the two methods and which do you advise for us beginners? Use the first method. The two will give you the same data size. Everything is completely the same. So I will advise you to use the first method. How can one troubleshoot common issues when linking multiple data sets? Okay, somebody said, how can one um, identify common issues when linking multiple data sets? Issues mostly come from data types. Issues mostly come from data types. So that's where you mostly have issues from. We're linking multiple data sets because when the data type is not the same and you're trying to link the two different data sets with a common column, let's say one, the data type is text, then the other one, the data type is numbers, it will have issues. So for this particular one we're working on, I would need to check now whether it's an issue of data type or which step did I skip. Okay, so which other question? Mr. Tayo Adebayo, I don't really understand what you placed on the screen. Um, any other question? Any other question? Okay, so the data sets, I will encourage us to take that data set and then work on it. I told us that there's a lady called Azizat. She worked on this particular data set and she did a complete dashboard. She chatted with me on WhatsApp, and what I did with her, I guided her on how to build a complete dashboard using this same project. I want to bring up her projects now. Let's look at it before we close. So let me bring up her link thing. So this is the lady. This is the lady Azizat Adebola Salau. She was in the class last week. She was in the class with us last week. So after the class, she took on the project, the data set, and she did a full um, dashboard. She had a discussion with me concerning the dashboard, and I made some corrections. So this is the final work. And personally, I'm impressed. When she sent me the work she did, I told her this is very good. I made some corrections, and she came up with this. So I want to encourage everybody too that when I give you a data set, these data sets, they are my data sets, but no, I've made it open. Everybody can take it and use it. So when we use a data set that is for a class, I will always encourage you take that data set and practice. Hello, if you're in my community, you get used to the fact that I always say that in data analytics, you get application is higher than learning. It is what you do after this class that really matters, not the fact that you attended the class. So please take the data set and then work on it. I would love to see your dashboard. I'll drop my WhatsApp number. When you finish the dashboard, send me on WhatsApp and say this is A, this is B, and I will correct you. I'll say these are things you're supposed to do. This is how to go about it, and other things that you should add to it. So I want to say to everybody that came to class today, thank you very much. I think we'll stop here for today. The correction to that particular data, that linking, I'll use it to start next week's class. I don't want to waste our time beyond this. The class was supposed to be for 30 minutes. So this is my WhatsApp number. You can always chat me on WhatsApp. Then I'm dropping the WhatsApp number to the platform. You can also always chat me on WhatsApp. If I'm not online, my colleague, my admin will quickly respond. That's number one. Number two, there's a discussion about the data sets. I always drop the data sets in the description section. So immediately after this class, check the description section. You'll see the data set and you practice with it. How can people join the class for the first time and have access? Okay, somebody said, Mr. John said, okay, people joining for the first time, how can they have access to the data set? Just check the description section of this video and you have the data set. So on that note, thank you very much. Any more question? 1 minute for one more question. Any further question? This is my WhatsApp number. Work on the project, share with me on WhatsApp, and I'll either, if I'm not online, my colleague will also, the admin will also work on it quickly and then tell you what to do next. Okay, so somebody said guide on resume. We always, my team, Mr. Austin is here. We plan on it together on what the next topic will be. Okay, so thank you very much and have a good night. See you next Sunday by 7 p.m.